Welcome to this meeting of Council. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded, and the voices and images of those participating in the meeting may be captured as part of the recording. Indigo Shire Council acknowledges the traditional owners of the land, which now comprises the municipality of Indigo Shire. We pay respects to their elders, past, present, celebrate and respect their continuing culture, and acknowledge the memory of their ancestors. As councillors, we have all taken an oath to carry out our duties in the best interests of the people of Indigo Shire and to do this in a fair and impartial manner. We are all committed to exercising the council's powers and functions to the best of our skills and judgment. Apologies and leaves of absence. We have Councillor Horn, Ian Allett, and Melinda Collis. Do we have any other apologies? Do we have any declarations of conflict of interest? Item 5 is open forum. The only person present in the chamber is Robin McLeish. Do you want to walk to the rostrum?
Ready to go?
Yes.
My first question tonight was one that Sorry. My first question tonight. Now I'm ready to go.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I need to declare a conflict of interest. I forgot to mention it earlier in the agenda. I've got a general conflict of interest with item 11.2, the Get Active Indigo grants, as I've got my father's a committee member of the Chiltern Rec Reserve Committee, which is nominated as a recipient of a grant. So I'll excuse myself at that item.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Okay, Robin McLeish, we're now to open forum.
Thank you. My first question tonight was one that I asked at the February meeting and waited 3 months and then repeated it. Tonight I will present it again. Will Council initiate contracts with the relevant authorities to introduce 40-kilometre speed limits in all of the Shire's central business district?
The issues of reviewing the speed limits in council's towns has been tabled at the most recent Traffic Liaison Committee meeting held in June. Some towns already have a 40-kilometre speed limit in the CBDs, some others don't. The consideration of a 40-kilometre-hour speed limit in Beechworth was supported by the committee, but is yet to be formally approved by Regional Roads Victoria. This process is expected to take some weeks.
Thank you. The question was to all CBDs, and that refers only to Beechworth?
No, as I started off, the issue of reviewing the speed limits in council's towns has been tabled. The most recent Traffic Liaison Committee meeting in June.
I just thought your closing comments spoke specifically of Beechworth.
It did, yes, because the speed limit, the consideration of the 40-kilometre-per-hour speed limit in Beechworth was supported by the committee. It was taken to the committee and supported by them. And I'm sure that if there's community concerns in other towns, it'll be brought to council's attention and we can go further. But all of those have gone to that committee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My second question, I have a little preamble. Several people who made submissions to the draft budget expressed concern that the new projects and the carryover projects had been consolidated. The CEO responded that the state government mandates the structure that all councils must use for capital works budgets. However, Indigo Shire has elected to retain their consolidated version, which is not fit for purpose, contravenes the structure identified by the government, and makes it difficult to produce a consistent report covering all councils. The official document, which I'm sure you're all familiar with and has probably been discussed at briefing meetings, states that It contains samples of the tables required and states, this presents a listing of the capital projects that will be undertaken for the 2022-23 year, classified by expenditure type and funding source. And then the important part, works are to be disclosed as current budget or carried forward from prior year. Unfortunately, time to correct this situation has passed as the approved budgets had to be submitted to the Minister for Local Government by June 30. Question 2, will Council confirm that the Capital Works budget for 2023-24 will be prepared in accordance with the format required by the Victorian Government?
Take that, Mr. Mayor.
CEO.
Thanks for the question, Robin. I note that we did digress from the budget format. We did that truly with the intention of trying to provide more information than the template requires. So it provides a whole lot more than is required. We did change the format to consolidate all the projects on the one line, and I think we did show, I know we did show separately carry over from budget from this year, but I acknowledge it wasn't the identical format. In fact, if we follow the format prescribed by the government, I think the community will see less information than we provided, but that's okay. I recognise that that doesn't make comparing with other councils as easy. You need to unravel it a bit. Take on board your comments, and there's some others made the same comment that they weren't able to interrogate the table as easily as they had in the past. So I take those comments on board. Since we got that feedback, I have got meetings scheduled with my finance staff, and we will revisit that format for next year and get it, I guess, back to a version that the community seems to want to see. I still would like to try and show more information than the government requires, because I think I have seen other councils' budgets and they do show the bare minimum, and quite frankly, it doesn't tell you much at all. So if you want us to truly go back to the government formula, you wouldn't see very much information, but I'm happy to go back there, but I will next year and this year try to provide as much information for the community as I can.
But
the openness and transparency,
yep.
And I'm taking comments on board, Robin. Thank you.
The format does give you the opportunity to put in additional information. It is stated within the text of the document. And the important part of that section that we were looking at in the budget was giving the councillors a very clear picture of the new projects that they were required to approve.
Yep.
That was not achieved with the mixing of the two.
I understood the question, and I think I've answered it. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Community and council achievements. Condolences. I have one. Fred Begenhole passed away recently. Fred was a member of the Indigo Shire Community Services Advisory Committee from 2004. Fred was awarded the Rutherglen Lions Melvin Joyce Fellowship for his service to the community. Until recently, Fred was a member of the Indigo Shire Awards and Grants Advisory Committee. He had held that for many, many years. Fred advocated on behalf of the Waggunya, Rutherglen and Chiltern communities. I'd like to move that a letter under seal be sent to his family. All moved by Councillor Croucher, seconded by Councillor Tyson. Is anybody against the motion? Does anybody else wish to speak to the motion? Carried. Item 8, the recommendation is that the following minutes be confirmed. The minutes of the council meeting held on 28 June 2022 as published on council's website, and 2 confidential minutes of the council meeting held on 28 June 2022 as provided to councillors under separate cover. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Price, Councillor Shepherd. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 8.1, business arising from previous minutes. Item 9 is petitions. There are no petitions to be tabled. However, I was asked by a member of the community when petitions had to be into council, and I was under the belief that it hadn't changed in the governance rules and that they could be taken to just before the start of the council meetings. A petition with 411 signatures was brought to the council yesterday in regard to Indigo Shire to support the relocation of the historical carriages to the railway goods shed. Unfortunately, that can't be tabled at this meeting, but will be tabled and part of the agenda of the August meeting. I apologise for not giving the correct information. CEO, have you got another one there?
No, there was another petition received in the last couple of days, which will also carry forward to the August council meeting with regards to drainage in Rutherglen.
Thank you. Item 10.1, the recommendation is the council resolves to issue a notice of decision to issue a planning permit for a 30-lot subdivision of land at 11A Scott Street, Rutherglen, subject to conditions. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Tyson. Councillor Price.
A good subdivision has a good mixture of lot sizes. This subdivision has that. It's been referred to different referral agencies with no objections to the proposal. Within the report, it complements it at every stage to say that it will help support growth in Rutherglen and it makes sense as to the location. There's no access issues. There was one objection that's been responded to, and this is a really good outcome for Rutherglen if we support this tonight. So I support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson.
Yeah, it's been rather an extended process where both parties have worked very well together. It meets all of the requirements that have been set down by council and will be a fantastic opportunity for the development in the heart of Rutherglen, and it will be not take long for that to be snapped up, I wouldn't think.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Price, do you wish to sum up? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 10.2, Planning Policy Framework Translation Report, CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. See, if you notice in the report, it makes reference to a translation document. We did submit this item into the agenda with the hope that the final version of the translation document would be ready and would be tabled this evening. Unfortunately, that hasn't been the case. So we're asking that this item be withdrawn and not be considered by council tonight. We will bring this back presumably to the August meeting when it's completed and ready to go.
It's been withdrawn. Do any councillors have any comments? No, thank you, CEO. Item 10.3, regarding the revenue and rating strategy and hardship policy project plan. The recommendation is that council endorses the project plan described in this report, including the following documents. 1, project plan overview. 2, community engagement plan. And 3, reference groups. Terms of reference. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Croucher, seconded by Councillor Tyson. Councillor Croucher.
Yes, I'd like to endorse this recommendation. I particularly like the idea of a community reference group being formed to have input into such important documents as the revenue and rating strategy and hardship policy. I would also hope that the reference group have representatives throughout the Shire and a variety of occupations.
Councillor Tyson.
Thank you. Yes, I'd also like to endorse this. It's great to see that we're going to actually go out to the community to help us with this one. And I'd just like to back up Councillor Croucher's words that I hope we have a very diverse range of peoples on the committee.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd.
I'd just like to congratulate the department on taking this on, because I think it's going to be an interesting opportunity to speak to the community about how much they think they should be rated. And I can imagine it'll be much easier for us just to get a report and say, yeah, that looks fine. So I look forward to seeing this process and congratulate them on going out there with a community survey and with I think there's 3 different ways of engagement in this process. So yeah, it's great to see.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Croucher. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.1, Child Safe Policy Update. The recommendation is the council adopt the revised Indigo Shire Council Child Safe Policy and Child Safe Reportable Conduct Scheme Procedure. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Tysell, seconded by Councillor Croucher. Councillor Tysell.
Yeah, as an early years educator, it's great to see that we're still focusing on the health and the well-being of our children. I note that we've actually extended on that and there are now more points. And I feel that this will help keep our children safer into the future.
Okay, Councillor Croucher.
I believe this is a very important document for us to have to ensure the safety of our most precious commodity, our kids.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Tysell, do you wish to sum up? No. Is anybody against the motion? Carried.
It's at this point I've got a conflict of interest, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Price.
Do I need to describe it again or? So I've got a conflict of interest with item 11.2. It's a general conflict of interest as my father is a ordinary committee member of the Chiltern Rec Reserve, which is listed within this item.
Thank you, Councillor Price. (11.2) is Get Active Indigo Grants Program. The recommendation is the council allocates $30,000 under the 2021-2022 Indigo Shire Get Active Indigo Grants Program. As follows, it then lists the number of projects, of which there's quite a few. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Tysell, seconded by Councillor Croucher. Councillor Tysell.
Yeah, I was actually a panelist on this and it was fantastic to see some of the new initiatives that were brought forward by many of the people who submitted. We addressed quite a few of the criteria, one being that we tried to diversify over the council so that many of these smaller groups could actually get a start and invite people into their sporting or organisational clubs that hadn't previously participated in any of the activities that were planned. So I think that as this takes place, there'll be a lot of activities that going forward in our community become quite popular.
Councillor Croucher.
Yeah, the aim of this program is to encourage and enable residents of Indigo Shire to be more active. And when I look at the spread of applications and projects from all parts of the Shire, I'm pleased to recommend that the grants amount and wish all these organisations receiving the grant all the best for the future. A really worthy program, this Indigo Grants program.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Tysell. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.3, local sports infrastructure grant. The recommendation that council retrospectively endorses the following project for submission to the 2022 Local Sport Infrastructure Fund. Rutherglen Barclay Park Multi-Use Change Facility, female-friendly facility, total project cost of $1.46 million. Sport and Recreation Victoria grant of $1 million. Council contribution $460,000. and endorses the council financial contribution to the project for the 2023-2024 year, should the project receive government funding. Somebody like to move that? Moved by Councillor Price. Seconder, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Price.
This is not in the usual fashion that we normally bring these projects, but due to a range of different factors, it's appropriate that we retrospectively endorse this project tonight. It's something that we've been aware of for quite some time. The Murray Felines were the inaugural team in the female football league here in the Northeast. It's the conditions that they get changed in at the facility. We're really lucky to have held on to them to stay there for so long because they're abysmal, basically. So it's really important that we support this application, which will mean that they've got a state-of-the-art facility, just as almost every other team in their league does. And we want to give them a really great home in Rutherglen. So a very worthwhile application, some great advocacy from the community, and a quick response from our staff and some really great work, particularly from Carleen Lamana, was noted by the community groups. So happy to put this forward, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd.
I'd just like to endorse what Councillor Price said, the fact that I really enjoy supporting community when they are passionate and are already working on something. It just makes sense for us to try and be flexible and move with them. And I'm great that we were able. It's great that we were able to do so. So just fingers crossed now that we get that facility.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? You wish to sum up, Councillor Price? I would like to add that we've also advocated to the member for Indi, Helen Haynes, to take this project to the Minister for Regional Development in Canberra. She said it was a priority, and I'd just like to say it's about gender equality. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 13, governance rules review. The recommendation is the council endorses the draft governance rules for community feedback for a period of 21 days and requires that the reviewed governance rules be presented to council for adoption at the council meeting scheduled for the 30th of August 2022. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Shepherd, seconded by Councillor Tyson. Councillor Shepherd.
So the governance rules are really how we conduct ourselves in this chamber and these meetings. And there's been a new template. We've had to look at some of the things that have been niggling and we want changed. And these are some of the changes. All of them hopefully will make this chamber work better. And I won't read them all out. There's a number there, but they're all important. We probably will review this again within, Jane, when do we review these governance? When we have an issue again?
Council can resolve to review them at any time. The standard thing would be once every electoral cycle.
Councillor Tyson.
Yeah, COVID has certainly made a lot of changes to the way that we operate council and our council meetings. And this just serves to address some of the changes that have needed to be made in the last few years. And I think it's for review in 2023. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion?
Sorry, can I just
Councillor Shepherd, sum up.
These are going out for the community for feedback. So anyone who may be interested in the council meetings and how we manage the governance rules and how we vote for the mayor, that might be an important one. They've got 21 days to review and give us feedback.
Does anybody else wish to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 13.3, informal meetings of councillors' records. The recommendation is the council accepts the attached informal meetings of councillor records. Would somebody like to move that motion? Moved by councillor Price, seconded by councillor Croucher. Councillor Price.
No, nothing, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Croucher. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 13.4, advisory committee minutes. I'm sorry, I missed item 13.2, contracts awarded under Chief Executive Officer delegation for information only. That a tender by JLT Insurance for the annual insurance renewals to the amount of $444,000. Item 13.4, advisory committee minutes. The recommendation the council receives the attached unconfirmed advisory committee minutes and notes the following recommendation from the finance committee, and that action is completed. The council accepts the year-to-date May finance report. And B, that the committee endorses the budget submissions report, including the proposed council resolution relating to submissions process. That council adopts the attached budget, including the budgeted financial statements. 3, notes the following recommendations from the Cultural Heritage Advisory Committee. An action is to be carried out under delegation. A committee agreed to write a letter of support to Deb Kemp for an external funding opportunity to support a review of the council's significant statements for heritage sites. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by councillor Shepherd, seconded by councillor Price. Councillor Shepherd.
The advisory committee minutes are noted in this section, but I think I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank the advisory committee for their advice that they do give us on issues relating to council issues. And the two that are in here, I was the chair of the Cultural and Heritage Committee meeting, and I think the minutes from those will probably be relevant later on in the discussions. So I think it's very important that we have these come to us and that we do pay attention and read those minutes and thank the committee for their attention.
Councillor Tyson. Sorry, Councillor Price. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Goldsworthy.
Yeah, just note further on what was spoken to in relation to the Cultural Heritage and Advisory Committee. It was proposed by Jonathan Sweet, who's a prominent member of the committee, in developing an options paper for carriages and then circulating the paper among the committee for further discussion. This would then be presented to council with a recommendation. I think we should be looking at that, particularly when we look at a later issue in the agenda.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? I'd just like to make some comments on the Cultural Heritage Advisory Committee referred to by Councillor Goldsworthy. Under item 7, it talks about the National Trust carriage collection and that the manager of the Burke Museum made comments that the National Trust would like to place them in storage for conservation and research. They do not believe that the carriages are ready for public access. I contacted the CEO of Heritage Victoria, of the National Trust, Simon Ambrose, and asked him whether that was a fact and had that come from the National Trust, to which he said no. the carriages need some attention, and once they had that attention, the collection would go out for public display. It also mentions here that Bilson's Brewery would like the carriages to be moved by the end of the year. I was talking to the owner of Bilson's, and they would have liked them removed tomorrow, not by the end of the year.
So could I seek clarity on that? Are you disputing the minutes?
I'm not disputing the minutes. I would say that the minutes are accurate, but I'm just saying I spoke to the CEO of the National Trust today, and he said that that's not correct. All right. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion?
Oh, I'd just like to sum up. Thanks.
Councillor Shepherd.
So as the chair of that committee meeting, it was important really that we did get that advice from the Cultural and Heritage Committee members who are, you can see their names on the web page, but they're all very much leading lights in the cultural and heritage area. And they were quite adamant that that the carriages were a national trust issue, and that really there should be an options paper that comes to council to discuss what we could be doing with those carriages. So I just really, I appreciate the fact that when we have an issue that it can go to an advisory committee who we do respect and esteem and do appreciate their advice. And of course, we don't have to take it, but it's great to have this explanation here around what they felt was a concern around the carriages. So, I understand you may see that there's something that you've sought some other advice, but the advice at the time was, I think, genuine.
I'd just like to ask you a question, Councillor. It says here that he was at Marsden, R. Hurst and J. Sweet all strongly oppose the idea of council taking on responsibility for the carriages. I don't, to my knowledge, council has never, ever said that they were for the idea of council taking over the responsibility for the carriages. And CEO, has council ever advocated that we wanted to take over the responsibility of those carriages?
But will you ask me a question?
Yes.
What was the question? Sorry.
E. Marsden, R. Hurst and J. Sweet all strongly oppose the idea of council taking on responsibility for the carriages. To my knowledge, council has never, ever had the idea of taking over the responsibility of the carriages. I'm just wondering why they'd say that.
I think it was because of the previous notice of motion around the goods shed, us putting them in the goods shed that had been brought. So they were asked, the committee was asked about the carriages and the goods shed. And so there was a discussion about if that's your space and you're taking them on to run the carriages in the goods shed, that they wouldn't recommend that for us to be running that. So
was that put up as a motion, was it?
That was discussed as a motion, yes. So the goods shed has been seen by the cranks and by a number of people throughout the Beechworth area. The goods shed has been advocated a number of times. We've had many emails and many people asking us why we can't put the carriages in the goods shed. So that was asked of the committee. Is the goods shed, should the carriages be moved and would they work in the goods shed? So that was their response. So yeah, that's my answer.
I don't think that motion was ever.
No, there's no motion. So the discussion was around the number of people that want, as the cranks have said I think, as you've said in your notice of motion, they would have liked to put it in the goods shed, as has many other people said they would like them to be in the goods shed.
I'm sorry, that's not in my motion at all.
Okay, so it's in the emails. It's in the emails that we've got many emails about we need to use the goods shed and we need to put the carriages in there. So that's the question that was asked of the committee. What should happen with the carriages?
As much as you want to. It's not in my motion.
No, okay, sorry. It's not in your motion, but I've just told you where that has come up. And I'm sure that the whole of Beechworth who'd be listening would say, exactly, that's where we would like them to be. But that was the question. The question was, should we have the carriages? Should we put them in the goods shed? And they said, no, that's not, that don't take on, they said, it's not your area. Don't take them on. There's a lot of issues around running the carriages. I understand that there's a number of people that would like the carriages to be left in Beechworth, and certainly that needs a discussion, and that's why they recommended an options paper.
CEO, has there ever been a suggestion from a councillor or this council to take over the responsibility of those carriages?
Mr. Mayor, I can't answer about individual councillors. I'm not aware of any council decision or council advocacy document that spoke about us taking over the carriages.
Thank you. Have you finished, Councillor Shepherd?
I was just answering a question.
Yeah. Yep. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. I'll now vacate the chair.
Do you want to mention number 12 at the moment as the motion? Or do we need to mention that or not?
It's not in the agenda.
Okay, item 14.1, the heritage carriage collection. Last person putting forward the motion, Mayor Bernard. Gaffney, do read the motion out, please.
Thank you. The motion is that Council thank Bilson's Brewery for their patience and support of the National Trust in storing and exhibiting the heritage carriage collection. 2, request the CEO to prepare a memorandum of understanding with the National Trust in regard to these historic carriages. 3, request the CEO to endeavour to find a new home for these carriages, either short-term or long-term. That's the motion.
Thank you. Have we got a seconder for that motion? Seconded, Councillor Tysell.
Could I have?
What did you want? Oh, sorry. Okay, Councillor Gaffney, would you like to speak to the motion at this stage? Oh, goodness gracious. Thought I had a time. I was trying to time you for 3 minutes. Oh, my God. Keep going. Sorry, Councillor Gaffney.
A number of historic heritage carriages, most over 100 years old, are owned by the National Trust of Victoria. They are currently stored and open for inspection at Bilson's Brewery in Last Street, Beechworth. Bilson's Brewery have been extremely patient and generous in their support of the National Trust. Their lease with the Trust expired over a year ago. Bilson's Brewery requires the space for their expanding business. There are a number of options available for the short-term or long-term rehousing of these carriages. At this stage, they are commercial in confidence. Bilson's Brewery have offered financial support for the rehousing of the carriages, a very generous offering. The Beechworth Heritage and Historical Society, the Beechworth Old Cranks Motor Club, and the Beechworth Men's Shed have all offered support in transportation and maintenance of these carriages. There will be no cost to council. I'd just like to reiterate that. There will be no cost to council, and council have never floated the idea of taking over the responsibility for those carriages. And I'm sure, well, I know the National Trust don't want to hand over to any other parties. They are owned by the National Trust.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tysell, seconder.
I'd like to acknowledge that the carriages are not an Indigo Shire asset. However, there are several that have significance to Beechworth and Indigo Shire. There is quite a lot of community support from several local groups to help the restoration at no financial cost to the Shire. In relation to the existing National Trust finding a more permanent home, I believe that Indigo Shire can and will help find a suitable home for the carriages. As I said, I don't believe there will be many that will be rehomed. If there is no home found, it is not my intention nor that of the motion that Indigo Shire Council are to incur any financial burden in the rehoming of any of these assets. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Tysell. Is there anybody who'd like to speak to the motion? Councillor?
I do have a couple of questions as
Yeah.
well.
Shall we ask questions first or speak to the motion? Is it the same sort of thing, I guess?
Well, no, it's not. I
Okay.
don't wish
The
to
question-
speak to the motion. I wish to ask some questions for clarity.
Okay. Over to you then, councillor Goldsworthy.
To the mover of the motion, how many carriages are you talking about?
There's a total of 31 there. Some would be in disrepair, so I don't think we'd be moving the 31.
And how big would the storage facility have to be if they moved to?
The storage facilities that are available, and I've spoken with the CEO about them, would be able to cater for all of those carriages.
So how big would they have to be?
How big would the actual?
Facility have to be?
I'm not sure.
What would be the storage requirements? Would they need to be air conditioned, security monitored? What location would they be?
Well, at the moment, they're in a shed that's enclosed. No air conditioning. I don't think they've ever had air conditioning since they were built, probably well over 100 years ago. There are some really significant carriages there, and you'd be talking about the hearse. I was there last week and I saw the Stanley taxi, which was able to transport 21 people between Stanley and Beechworth, a horse-drawn carriage. It's of huge historic and heritage value. And we're known as the Heritage Shire, and our history and heritage is so important. And as is known, the majority of people in Beechworth and probably the Shire value those carriages to a really large degree. And it would be just such a shame if we just let them go.
Sorry, I
National Trust-
actually asked what the storage requirements
I think
would
you're
be.
just getting off the topic just a little bit, please.
I thought he was talking about air conditioning.
Well, I asked what the storage requirements would be.
Well, they certainly would need air conditioning.
Okay.
Could I just like to add, in answer to that question, that the old Cranks Motor Car Club and the Men's Shed are looking towards getting old tools, the old world tools, to repair the carriages and to bring them up to standard. They need a better location for that work to be carried out.
So at point 2 of the motion, what would be the MOB? What would the MOU be for? So is it for the storage of the carriages, the repairs, maintaining them, access to them, moving them? What's it actually for?
Well, it's a request that the CEO to prepare a memorandum of understanding, which the National Trust CEO is very keen to do.
But what's the MOU going to be for? Like you can have an MOU for what? What are we actually having an MOU for?
Well, it would be for the storage, repair. The volunteer groups in Beechworth are prepared. In fact, they're extra keen to carry out the work on those carriages, and they're to be congratulated, particularly the Men's Shed and the old Cranks Motor Car Club.
So you want
They've all
this-
got the skills. There's an engineer with the old Cranks prepared to give up his time. He's semi-retired.
So you want the CEO to enter into an MOU with the National Trust in relation to the storage of these facilities,
Yes,
carriages?
I've spoken to the council CEO and the CEO of the National Trust. They're both quite happy to, and I'm sure they could come to some understanding. I'd just like to mention too, what I mentioned before, there is no cost to Indigo Shire Council.
Yeah. So where do you think they would be stored?
In the short term or the long term?
Well, both.
Well, I think I mentioned earlier, you may not have heard, that's commercial in confidence.
Well, I move we go into a confidential session of council so we can learn, because you certainly haven't informed us. So I'll move that motion that we move into a confidential session of council so that we can discuss the potential locations.
All right.
Okay, have we got a seconder for that? Jane, did you want to mention something? No, no, we got some advice.
Through you, Mr. Chair, could you please be a bit more explicit about the section of the Act that you're calling this as a confidential session? What particular aspect of this makes it need to go into confidential so I can record that for the minutes,
Yep, so the
please?
move of the motion suggests that it's commercial in confidence.
Through you, Mr. Chair, for the purposes of the confidential section of the Act, there is no such thing as commercial in confidence. Can I assume that that means that it contains information that would be unreasonable and detrimental to the commercial interests of another entity?
That would be fine by me.
So where do we go by there? So we've got a mover, have we? And have we got a seconder? Thank you very much. So where do we go now? Do we sort of cut out?
You vote.
Oh, sorry, yeah. All those in favour? Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, if we just pause for a moment while we'll do the technology, and we'll have to ask Robin McLeish to leave the room, and we'll see the technology that makes sure that we're.
Thank you, Robin. We're going into confidential now. Thank you very much for your attendance tonight. Okay, then where we left off at the last meeting, I've just got a few people who would like to speak or ask some more questions. Councillor Goldsworthy, you'll be finishing up your question soon, will you?
Surely, I'd just like to foreshadow a motion that should this motion be lost, that the suggestion from Jonathan Sweet, who's speaking at the Cultural Heritage Advisory Committee meeting, be adopted, and that is he proposed council develop an options paper for the carriages and to circulate that paper among the committee for further discussion. This would then be presented to council with a recommendation. I'm just foreshadowing that motion should this one be lost.
Councillor Shepherd, did you have something you wanted to say? Ask a question?
I just have a question around the memorandum of understanding with the National Trust. I'm just concerned why the National Trust isn't doing something with their carriages. As Councillor Teisel said, there's only a couple of them that are relevant to us. I'm concerned what then happens to the rest of them. I visited that site often, and well, not often, a few times, and I agree there's a significant collection. So if we take our couple, then what happens? And should it be the National Trust that is working with us on what to do with those carriages?
That's what an MOU is all about. It's about working together and coming to a solution together. The memorandum of understanding, the CEO of the National Trust is in favour of it. CEO of Indigo Shire is in favour of it. I'm not sure what the difficulty is.
Well, my question is, it's been an issue for a while now, and I've been expecting the National Trust to move on this. It's their carriages. And National Trust, I assume, have been speaking with Bilsons. And I'm unsure why National Trust isn't working with the community and with Bilsons at relocating them or doing an options paper, what could happen with them, which I'd be quite happy to be part of, a National Trust-led discussion around those carriages. It's not, I don't think it's our skill nor our knowledge around those. Anyway, I'm now debating. Sorry, I've asked a question. Yeah.
What's the question?
Well, you answered me.
Okay. Is there any further discussion around this at this stage? Did you want to say something, Councillor?
I'd just like to say that there's been meetings between the National Trust and Indigo Shire.
Now he's talking to the motion.
Indigo Shire.
I'll ask you to sum up in a minute. Is there any other questions? Councillor Tyson, did you want to ask a question or? Yeah, okay.
Just back to Councillor Goldsworthy. So that motion, the motion that's before us loses, that motion will come to the next council meeting, or it'll be tonight.
And if this motion was lost, it would be considered straight afterwards.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any further questioning or discussion?
I'd like to speak against the motion.
Okay. Away you go.
This motion is vague in relation to what is required for any MOU. It fails to give the direction required. These carriages are the responsibility of the National Trust. It's incumbent on the National Trust to take the lead on this issue. There are too many unknowns in relation to the cost, storage and maintenance of these historic carriages. This notice of motion is another one that does not consider good process and doesn't follow it. The Cultural Heritage Advisory Committee is willing and able to provide appropriate advice to council, just like
Point of order,
General follows.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Thank you.
The point of order was he said this is another motion. What other motion are you referring to?
You got to ask what's the point of order?
Okay.
The point of order is under item 68(1), which is contrary to the governance rules.
In what aspect?
Okay, I don't think we need any more debating on that. Have you finished with your?
No, I haven't. It was just another interruption by the.
No, thank you.
I haven't finished. So
just finish it up, please.
Just like we listen to and generally follow the advice of other committees, we should do so on this issue with the Cultural Heritage Advisory Committee.
Thank you. Councillor Gaffney, would you like to sum up now, please?
I've just got some questions. Oh.
Okay, who else wants to speak against the motion? Councillor Price?
Yeah. We've all been aware of this issue for quite some time, waiting for the National Trust to do something about it. We have to be really clear about what issues we take the lead on and the ones that we don't. Otherwise, that does confuse the situation. And so whether you think that we'd be putting council resources or budget into it or not, we would then have to drive this to a result. And the idea that it can be brought here with a notice of motion and that can be some silver bullet that no one else has been able to provide at any stage during this process, I just can't see how that would work. I'm really confident that our staff are across this issue and working with the National Trust, with Bilson's, with the Cultural Heritage group, of which there is some really skilled members, and I'd be happy to, I won't be voting for this motion. I'll be waiting for Councillor Goldsworthy's motion to follow if this is lost.
Councillor Shepherd, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I did. I have concerns with notice of motions that where we already have a process that's happening in council. I know the community and sometimes councillors want things to happen faster, but we have a process that's occurring at the moment. It might not be happening fast enough, but as per Councillor Price's, I think, good reckoning of the situation, we need to continue with the process and come up with an options paper where we know exactly what we're getting into. I understand the community's concern. I think all the councillors here would agree that we're concerned about the carriages, but a notice of motion plopped on top of our CEO and asking him to do a memorandum of understanding with the National Trust, of which I'm not sure what that would entail with that memorandum, concerns me when I don't know what those outcomes might be. So I'm concerned about the issue, but I don't think this notice of motion answers it.
Okay, Councillor Gaffney, would you like to sum up, please?
Yes, it's interesting that Councillor Goldsworthy, I think you're the chair of the Cultural Heritage Advisory Committee, and you're on that committee with Councillor Shepherd.
I hope that's not a slur. Is it?
I'm just making
Okay, it's just hold it for a minute, please. Would you please just sum up? Thank you, Councillor Gaffney. Thank you.
I'm trying to sum up, and why I keep getting interrupted, I don't know. The whole purpose of this notice of motion is to support the community, number one, to support our heritage, number two, and number three is to support our history. If you want to vote against that, that's fine. I'm only concerned about the carriages, the community concern. It would be the question that I'm asked the most is all about the carriages and what's going to become of those carriages. If you don't care, it doesn't matter. But to get an overview, I don't know. I've been talking with Dr. Annette Schulz, who's the collection officer with the National Trust. She says this is one of the most important collections and we must save it at all costs. If you don't want to, that's a decision for you.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to have the vote at this particular stage for 14.1, the Heritage Carriages Collection. All those in favour of the motion? Councillor Tyson, Councillor Gaffney, Councillor Croucher. Those people against? Councillor Goldsworthy, Councillor Shepherd, Councillor Price. Seeing there's a tie, I have the casting vote. The motion is carried. Thank you.
Item 15.1 is the Mayor's Diary. Any questions for information only? Item 16.1 for information only, the decisions register. Item 17, general business. Do any councillors have any general business? We have no confidential business. I now declare the meeting closed.